You can write a music for a building, or write a building for a music. Architecture is not an art. Architecture is architecture. I don't care about aesthetics. I care about poetry. Philippe Samyn, a designer of constructions. My job is to match the aim of a bright commissioner with the potential, the history of the site. And it is fundamental to take the time to look like a child to what a site can offer. It goes from history to insects, to plants, to wind, to sun, to nature of the ground, to the socio-cultural, historical aspects of a site. I would tell you, the most famous building will be the one I will design next week. I'm like a mother. I love all my projects. But I first love all my commissioners because it's thanks to them. So I wouldn't put any project forward because it would be not respectful of the others. So if someone is interested what I'm busy with or what I've been busy with, just go on our website. It's a factual website, www.samynpartners.com, and I think it is just a site that describes things with no opinion, no comments. Of course, just to give you a simple answer, the most important one is the Euro building, the Council of the European Union, of course. But I could also quote the auditorium or the first year of medicine at Erasmus Hospital, or the subway station at Erasmus Hospital. In less than a month from now, we will inaugurate the psychiatric clinic Sans Souci in Jet, which I'm working on since 29 years. It is amazing to see that what I designed 29 years ago has been built for part the last years. If you look at what I'm building, that's why I call myself a builder. I don't care about aesthetics. I care about poetry. Building the right way, being careful for human beings, brings it aesthetics. And this kind of aesthetic tends to be out of the time. And look at the place where we're here. This is our office. It's a farm from 1830. We bought a ruin that was supposed to be destroyed. I had no money. I said, "You're crazy, I will not destroy it, I will restore it." So about 30 years ago, we restored, at low cost, as a matter of fact, this farm. The owner of this site was an airplane builder from Tel Aviv, who had charged a developer to destroy this, to put an apartment block instead of it, and all the neighborhood was against it. So I called the guy in Tel Aviv and said, "Well, I buy your ruin," and he's so happy to sell it. And then it was very funny because I called the deputy in charge of urban planning here in the commune, and telling him that I wanted to restore the farm to put her office. He said, "No, that's not possible because it's a housing zone." So I told him, "I mean, you're crazy. I mean, I offer you to restore this farm, and that could be transformed in housing later on. But in the meantime, for a couple of decennia, I'd like to put our office here." So it was based on a large consensus. Very particularly, we didn't destroy anything. Yes, the toilets added, because there had been a nightclub for a couple of years. There was a dirty brick toilet block added. That one we destroyed. And then we discovered there was an evidence of a kind of secondary building. Only the two ruins were existing here. But I thought it was interesting to make this internal court as a quiet piece, you see. And so I discussed with urban planning and with everyone. Said, I'd like to make to close the court and to put a water mirror in the middle, and then to plant an oak tree from 77, the age of the team, the age of my eldest daughter, and this oak is still there. It has been lightened, so it lost its head a couple of years ago, but it's still there. It's very symbolic. I'm a maniac. I like clean things in order. I have to admit that this maniac side forced me to put chemicals in the water pool to have it clean. Can you imagine that? It took me 28 years to realize I was wrong. So since a good year now, we leave it natural. It's green now. Nobody is annoyed by that, and we will plant some nenufar and other plants in it whenever we have some money to spend for that. We have to be very careful in making statements. We always thinking the mistake we might do by blindness, even with a lot of goodwill, even with the best intention, you can make dirty mistakes. A lovely mess. Brussels, if you look, is a treasure of testimony of architecture of any kind. So before destroying something in Brussels, you just have to look at it. So you have, of course, this, but that's all over the world, this very sad period of the last 50 years, where people didn't care about energy, people didn't care about people. You had central business districts, people thinking with a lot of goodwill that it was the future, that it was giving employment. So the business district in Brussels, being the Quartier Nord or Arlois, is a drama, is an environmental drama. So those parts will evolve. So I'm against destruction, because a building has a memory, but you can transform it. For example, Rue de la Loi or Rue Béliard, you could just imagine to make it more porous, to destroy, let's say, one building on tree to get some sunlight coming in the street, planting trees there, transforming the skeletons of what remains into something more livable, giving natural ventilation, daylight all over. You know, the limitation of speed to 30 kilometers an hour a couple of years ago is magnificent, and it should be 25 kilometers an hour. Now with electrical cars, streets might become again citizen-friendly, and by reduction with the electrical car, the limit of speed makes that you have no noise anymore in the streets. And imagine you put trees on those streets, then you don't have dust anymore also. That means that you can ventilate naturally the building by opening a window instead of putting airco, and that you can just enjoy the outside air and not polluted, with no dust, with no noise. Think about the buildings of Victor Horta. They have windows that opens, you know. But all those boxes, airco with reflecting glass, are deemed to disappear, because it's so abnormal, and it's a very short period in history. So of course this is a bad souvenir. It's a bit like World War I or World War II for architecture, you know. I made some of those buildings. I'm guilty of that too. For example, I made the Dexia Tower. Yes, indeed, but it is not really the expression of a sustainable building. So you see, a career without mistakes does not exist. So you see in Brussels a treasury of architecture, a huge freedom, as a matter of fact, an urban planning looking humanistically, even to the most crazy proposal. So it is a good museum of architecture. In fact, architecture is not an art. Architecture is architecture. This is a major confusion, because art is art, and architecture needs art exactly as architecture needs science and discoveries, and invention. So, you know, my motto. When the king ennobled me, I had to choose a motto, and I made it in Latin. To be clear, it's reperire, invenire, creare. Discover, invent, create. And architecture has a duty to look at the tree. So it's far from art, but it includes art. I try always to invite an artist in my project, and to tell you how consistent I think I am, I'm using the materials, the natural colors, and if I have to use a paint, it is a pure gray. So it's a pure mixture of black and white. And it took me years to get the paint industry to produce me 20 grays. Now Sigma Coatings has been absorbed by PPG, the American company, and they still produce the same grays. Very funny. It just reflects the color radiating from the object they are looking at. And so since then, I'm using those grays in all my projects, and as a manual. And why? First, because I think deeply that putting some yellow, red, blue, green in a white is cheating somehow. It's influence you. You see a white wall, but as a matter of fact, it's not really white. So this one is white. This one is a pure white. But you know, typically it is a manipulation of your sense, which I think is unfair. Jacques Hugo, who used to be one of my mentors, who was a very modest but profound architect, one day told me the infinite adaptability of human being, and think how true this is. So, human being adapts to space. Even if you think you're designing space for human being, this is never true, because no human being is equal to another one. So people adapt to space. So it is important for space to be ethic, to be respectful of people, because it has to please the biggest amount of possible of people. But it's a philosophical issue. I believe in universal beauty, and you have a lot. It's a belief, or it's the consequence of my reflection on it. But I can also accept, and I have good friends who don't believe at all in universal beauty. But working a little bit all over the planet, it's amazing. It confirms my belief in the notion of universal beauty. But you have to look at it not as an image, but at the fundamental behind the image. It is also extremely important, I think, to be able to see the scales in a building. That all the scales, from the millimeter from a small joint to the landscape of a kilometer, that every scale, the meter, central, is important. A building with huge flat surfaces is not human, because it has no scale. You know, a large glass building, 20 or 30 meter wide, 50 meter high, it's just not at human scale. And so nobody likes it. You might be impressed by it, like you can be impressed by a terrible gun, but it's like a gun, like an arm, but we need flowers. And in contrary, you look at the Art Nouveau buildings, you see the scale all over. Look, Le Palais des Beaux-Arts in Brussels, I mean, it's a big building, but you're not disturbed, because everything it has, or human scale. It goes back then to the nature of proportions. There are proportions that makes people feel comfortable, that relax people. And those are known since eternity. Vitruvius was the first one who wrote about it, and Vitruvius got it from the Greeks. And it is a Dutch monk called Hans Dom van der Laan, a Dominican, was amazed to see that some part was still in Greek. That means that Vitruvius had the modesty and honesty not to translate something he couldn't understand. And so van der Laan took decennia to try to discover what the Greeks were trying to say. And that's how he rediscovered what he called the plastic number, il nombre plastico, plastische getal, which is the equivalent of the octave in music. Go to Kikikima, I write a lot about it. And it goes back to the triangle of Pythagoras, which is not Pythagoras, by the way, because the Chinese had discovered it many centuries before. You have the musical octave and the architectural octave. Music is not adapted to men. Man adapts himself to music. It charms him or not. You have music that excites you, and you have music that relieves you. And I think you have the same in architecture, but for permanent architecture, it has to be quiet. in this work on the proportion based on 3, 4, 5 is fundamental. 3 to 4 power 1 to 8 gives you 10, etc. And so you have exactly like a piano, you have 7 octaves. The story of coming to the pianoforte with this, when people realized that you had 7 octaves, it was fair enough that you didn't have to go in lower in frequency or high in frequency. You have the same in architecture. Besides figurative paintings, material arts, music is probably the art which is the most close to architecture. And you can write a music for a building, or write a building for a music. That's why we have to honor your composer to write a specific music for this building. As a conclusion, because I invite everyone to come here to enjoy the festival and the music created for this space. I'll be a spectator, a listener also with great interest.